Additionally, besides the statutory changes that have been made in 43 states, most of them rather rigorous, there have been a couple of state Supreme Court cases. The way to think about this is that the federal Constitution, the Bill of Rights, protects your rights as a floor. The federal government, the state governments, the municipal governments cannot violate those rights. But state constitutions can be interpreted to protect more rights than the federal Constitution does. So here in Minnesota, for example, the state Supreme Court has interpreted the equivalent of the Fourth Amendment to protect more rights on issues of searches and privacy than the Fourth Amendment does. The Minnesota State Constitution also protects the free exercise of religion more than the First Amendment does. Go ahead.
Just quickly, did you say Kelo was a Supreme Court decision?
The United States Supreme Court decided the case in favor of New London in a 5-4 decision.
Okay.
June 23rd, 2005.
With David Souter being swindled.
David Souter was with the majority. Can you name the other justices?
I cannot.
Can you guess the political alignment of the five justices? So it was generally perceived as those 4 justices who were considered more liberal, and including Souter and Anthony Kennedy, and the 4 justices who were considered more conservative, Rehnquist, Scalia, Thomas, and O'Connor, were on the side of the property owners. So anyway, the Ohio Supreme Court had faced a similar case soon after the Kelo-decision, and it ruled in favor of the property owners in that the state constitution of Ohio, a Northwest Territory state like the state of Minnesota, the state constitution of Ohio protects property rights greater than the federal constitution, and you cannot take property in Ohio for someone else's private development. Now, April, back to your question. I don't think there is a connection between the limits on taking property and the limits on taxes.
Which are practically none.
There are very few you don't have a constitutional right to low taxes.
Right.
Taxes are a product of democracy, of getting the right person in office, not necessarily a constitutional provision. So our view is that we lost the battle at the United States. We lost the battle at the United States Supreme Court, but we have generally won the war in that the American public today is much more aware of what these 2 crazy words, eminent domain, mean, and they don't like those 2 crazy words, and no city council member in their right mind is going to advocate for the taking of your home for someone else's private development.
We actually made it a little bit harder too in the right now, where it took, before it would be 3 votes, just a majority. We went to the 4 vote.
You did. Brilliant.
Yeah, we did. So we made sure it had to be majority. So.
Super majority.
Yes.
So that is our core sort of property rights issue. Under this pillar of property rights, we're doing a couple other cases, suing the city of Red Wing on inspection, their inspection regime, and we're also engaged in asset forfeiture reform. Asset forfeiture is the power of the police to seize your assets when they suspect you of a crime. And if they do seize your assets when they suspect you of a crime, you have to engage in this bizarre lawsuit, King versus 2008 Honda Civic. You must sue your own car. Or King versus $792 in U.S. currency. You must sue your own cash that has been seized. So we view that through the same prism of property rights and are working under the pillar of property rights to reform asset forfeiture laws in the country. Free speech, yes, sir.
I have a question on that point. Is that a fairly recent phenomenon, the seizure of property, or has that been status quo for many, many years and generations, or is it really ramped up? I kind of get the feeling that a lot of those assets are being used to do things like fund drug task forces and so forth.
Very good. Your instinct is right about this. Just a little history on it. Asset forfeiture came about in the 17th century in England. And the idea was that the king was really upset that ships were not paying taxes and not flying under the British flag. Well, you couldn't find the ship owner. So what you did was you prosecuted the cargo. You prosecuted the ship. In essence, you criminalized the ship in absentia because you couldn't get the owner of the ship. Well, fast forward to the war on drugs, and today we have evolved in the issue of drugs from prevention of the trade, sort of burning off the Colombian and Bolivian fields, moved away from rehabilitation of the addict to going after the proceeds and trying to shut down drug trades by making it financially much more difficult. Law enforcement is somewhat of a beneficiary of that effort. In Minnesota, local law enforcement keeps 70% of the proceeds when forfeitures are brought under state law, and 80% when they're brought under federal law. And so the questions that we're raising are, does this distort law enforcement? Said differently, if there's a drug sale going on, do I want to, as a law enforcement agent, bust it at the time to stop the distribution of the drugs, or do I want to wait and stop it when the cash has been exchanged? And so there are some issues along those lines. So that's our property rights pillar. Free speech.